Boys don't cry. 3 words. One devastating command, a psychological pattern that millions of people carry into adulthood without even knowing it. If you heard this phrase growing up, what you experienced wasn't just a lesson in emotional control. It was a complete rewiring of how your nervous system processes feelings. It was training an emotional disconnection that still affects you today. Research from the Harvard Center on the Developing Child shows something critical. Children who learn to suppress emotions develop chronically elevated cortisol levels. Their stress response stays activated even when there's no threat. Their bodies exist in permanent survival mode. This isn't about being tough. This is about psychological damage that creates lifelong patterns in relationships, mental health, and self-understanding. And if you're recognizing yourself in this, what you're feeling right now is valid. There's a scientific reason you struggle with emotions, and it started with a command you had no choice but to obey. What happens when a child learns to swallow tears? Let me explain what actually occurs in your brain when you're trained in emotional repression. Normal emotional development works like this. You feel something. You express it through tears, laughter, or words. Someone validates that feeling. You learn to process emotions naturally and move through them. But emotional repression creates a completely different neural pathway. You feel the emotion. You receive the message that expressing it is wrong or weak. You force the feeling down into your nervous system. That suppression becomes automatic over time. Studies from the University of Minnesota Institute of Child Development reveal the consequences. Children trained in emotional suppression show reduced emotional vocabulary by age 7. They can't identify feelings in themselves. They struggle to read emotions in others. This is called alexithymia, the inability to recognize and name emotional experiences. This isn't just being less emotional. This is fundamental damage to your emotional intelligence that affects every relationship you'll ever have. The ACEs research on adverse childhood experiences demonstrates clear connections. Emotional invalidation in childhood predicts adult mental health disorders. Depression rates increase by 43%, anxiety disorders by 37%, substance abuse issues by 51%. When someone told you to swallow your tears, they weren't teaching you strength. They were teaching you disconnection, and your nervous system adapted to survive that disconnection. 3 stages of emotional shutdown understanding. How this pattern develops helps you recognize it in your own life. Stage 1. The training phase. You're a child. You feel pain or sadness or fear. You cry because that's what humans do with overwhelming emotions. Then comes the command. Stop crying. Swallow those tears. Be strong. You don't understand what's happening, but you want approval. You want love. You want to be accepted. So you try. You concentrate. You force the tears back down. You learn that emotional expression threatens your connection to the people you need most. Attachment theory explains this perfectly. Secure attachment forms when you can express emotions freely and receive consistent, loving responses. But conditional acceptance creates anxious or avoidant attachment patterns. In this moment, your brain is learning a devastating equation. Love equals emotional invisibility. Worth equals suppression. Safety requires hiding vulnerability. This becomes the foundation of how you'll approach every intimate relationship in your future. Not because you're broken, because you were taught that emotional expression threatens connection. Stage 2, the automation phase. Eventually, repression stops being something you consciously do. It becomes automatic. Your nervous system reorganizes itself around emotional suppression. You stop choosing not to cry. You simply can't anymore. The pathway is gone. Neuroplasticity research from Stanford explains this process. Your brain creates neural pathways based on repeated patterns. Every time you suppress an emotion, that suppression pathway strengthens. The expression pathway weakens through disuse. Eventually, it's pruned away entirely. By adolescence, most emotionally repressed people cannot access their feelings even when they desperately want to. The neural pathway for emotional expression has been eliminated. The brain has literally changed its physical structure to accommodate survival through disconnection. This is why so many adults say, "I don't know how to cry anymore," or "I feel numb inside." It's not a personality trait. It's neurological adaptation to childhood conditioning. Stage 3, the dissociation phase. This is the most dangerous stage. You lose contact with your own internal emotional experience entirely. You're not just hiding feelings. You can't access them. You smile but don't know why. You go through life disconnected from the emotional information that should guide your decisions, relationships, and self-understanding. This is called dissociation, a psychological defense mechanism where you separate from your own experience to avoid overwhelming pain. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk's research on developmental trauma shows that chronic emotional invalidation creates the same brain patterns as physical abuse. The impact is identical. Dissociation from emotional experience becomes your default mode of existence. And here's what nobody tells you. This doesn't just affect sadness. When you shut down one emotion, you shut down all of them. Joy becomes muted. Excitement feels dangerous. Love feels threatening because it requires vulnerability. You become a person going through the motions of life without actually feeling alive. There's a powerful metaphor in the short film that inspired this analysis. The boy became an ocean inside. The ocean inside the boy was loud. This captures exactly what happens in your nervous system when emotions are chronically suppressed. Emotions don't disappear when you suppress them. They accumulate. They create internal pressure. They distort your body's functioning in ways you don't even recognize as connected to emotional repression. The physical signs of emotional suppression include chronic muscle tension, especially in your neck and shoulders, digestive problems with no medical explanation, sleep difficulties or recurring nightmares, frequent headaches, restless or hyperactive behavior. These aren't separate issues. These are your body's attempts to process emotions that have nowhere to go. In the film, the mother interprets the boy's internal noise as hunger. She offers food, but it wasn't physical hunger. It was emotional hunger, a desperate need for feelings to be seen, validated, and processed, and food never satisfies emotional hunger. Shopping doesn't. Substances don't. Achievement doesn't. Nothing external can fill the void created by disconnection from your own internal experience. The short film shows something critical through the boy's sister. She cries freely. She processes emotions naturally. She says crying feels so good, such a relief. And the result? She's happy. She has permission to feel, to express, to process emotions in a healthy way. This gender difference isn't accidental. It's the result of social conditioning that begins in early childhood. Girls learn. You can cry. You can need comfort. Your emotions are valid. You're allowed to be vulnerable. Boys learn. You need to be strong. Emotions are weakness. Vulnerability is shameful. Real men don't need emotional support. Research from the American Psychological Association shows that boys receive less emotional vocabulary from parents, fewer conversations about feelings, less permission to express fear, sadness, or insecurity. The consequences: adult men experience dramatically higher rates of substance abuse, violent behavior, suicide, and inability to form deep emotional bonds. But here's what you need to understand. If you experience this, it's not because you're male. It's because you were taught that masculinity requires emotional amputation. That's not truth. That's trauma disguised as strength. Real strength isn't suppressing emotions. Real strength is having the courage to feel them fully and process them honestly. When the dam finally breaks in the film, the boy eventually cries. He stubs his toe, and suddenly all the suppressed emotions flood out. Not just the physical pain, everything he's been holding back for years. Why does physical pain finally break through when emotional pain couldn't? Because physical pain is immediate, undeniable. Your nervous system can't suppress it the same way it learned to suppress feelings, and when that emotional dam finally breaks, it's not proportional. One small trigger releases years of accumulated pain. This is the pattern you see in adults with emotional repression histories. They can't respond proportionally to emotions. A minor frustration causes complete collapse. A small disappointment triggers rage. A gentle criticism feels like annihilation because it's never just about the current moment. It's about decades of feelings that were never processed. If you've ever wondered why you overreact to small things, this is why. Your nervous system is trying to release pressure that's been building since childhood. It's not weakness. It's your body's desperate attempt to return to emotional equilibrium. Breaking the cycle. The path to emotional integration. The film's ending offers something rare. Hope for transformation. The boy grows up, he's with his father, and he reverses the dynamic. You can cry, Dad. It will help you. This moment represents three powerful psychological truths. Truth 1. Cycles can be broken when you offer yourself emotional permission. You interrupt a pattern that probably exists for generations in your family. You're not just healing yourself. You're healing your family lineage. Research on intergenerational trauma shows that unprocessed emotional patterns pass through family systems until someone has the awareness and courage to stop them. That person can be you. Truth 2. Healing doesn't require blame. The boy doesn't confront his father with anger. He offers compassion. He understands that his father was also taught to swallow tears. That toxic masculinity is transmitted through wounded fathers raising wounded sons. Understanding this doesn't excuse the damage, but it frees you from the belief that you're broken because your parents failed you. They were operating from their own unhealed wounds. Breaking the cycle means choosing differently for yourself. Truth. 3. Vulnerability is actual strength. When you give yourself permission to feel, you demonstrate real maturity. You understand that emotions aren't weakness. They're information. They're guidance. They're the language your nervous system uses to communicate what you need. Suppressing that communication doesn't make you strong. It makes you disconnected from the wisdom of your own body. Maybe you're reading this and recognizing patterns. Here's how emotional repression shows up in adulthood. You feel numb most of the time. Emotions feel distant or muted. You watch people cry in movies and wonder why you can't. You intellectualize feelings instead of experiencing them. You say, I think, when asked, how do you feel? You struggle with intimacy. Deep connection feels threatening. Vulnerability feels like weakness. You keep people at arm's length without knowing why. Relationships feel shallow even when you want them to be deep. You have physical symptoms without medical explanation. Chronic pain, digestive issues, tension headaches, sleep problems. Your body is holding emotions that your consciousness won't acknowledge. You overreact to minor triggers. Small frustrations cause disproportionate responses. You go from zero to rage instantly, or you shut down completely when emotions arise. You use substances, food, work, or other behaviors to manage internal states. Not because you're weak, because you were never taught healthy emotional regulation. You're using external tools to manage internal experiences you can't access directly. If you recognize yourself here, understand this. You're not broken. You adapted to survive an environment that didn't allow emotional expression. That adaptation served you then, but it's limiting you now. Here's the hopeful part. Your brain's neuroplasticity means change is possible. The same mechanism that created suppression pathways can create expression pathways. It requires consistent practice. It requires patience. It requires creating safety for emotions to emerge. Dr. Daniel Siegel's research on interpersonal neuroscience shows that emotional integration is possible at any age. The brain can form new neural pathways. The nervous system can learn new patterns. Dissociation can be reversed. This happens through practices like therapy, somatic experiencing, emotional awareness exercises, and safe relationships where you practice vulnerability. It's not quick, but it's possible. The goal isn't to become emotionally uncontrolled. The goal is emotional literacy. The ability to feel emotions, understand them, and respond to them wisely. That's actual emotional maturity. If you grew up being told to swallow your tears, what happened to you was real. The impact on your nervous system is measurable. The consequences in your adult life are legitimate. You're not too sensitive for struggling with this. You're not weak for wanting to reconnect with your emotions. You're not broken for finding intimacy difficult. You were trained in disconnection, and now you're trying to find your way back to yourself. That takes enormous courage. The real question isn't, why can't I just get over this? The real question is, what do I need to feel safe enough to feel again? And that question opens the door to genuine healing. Not suppression disguised as strength, but integration, wholeness, the ability to be fully human with the full range of human emotional experience. Your emotions were never the problem. The command to hide them was, and now you have the awareness to choose differently, to give yourself permission to feel, to recognize that tears aren't weakness. They're release, they're healing, they're proof that you're finally connected to yourself again. That's not just recovery. That's revolution.